Once upon a time, there was a young man who was not especially good at sports or small talk. He didn't do a lot of things that other young men did, and he didn't care as much what other people thought. He did have a loud voice and a knack for putting words together, and eventually they started calling him the preacher. The young man kept looking for a key, for something that was missing, for the one thing that would make him whole and happy. He kept thinking that if he could only be a little better at his work, or marry the right person, buy the right toys, or have the right experiences, then that might make him happy. And then, after the young man grew old, he took pen to paper to put down what he had learned. And this is part of what he wrote. Again, I saw that under the sun, that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful. But time and chance happeneth to them all. For no one can anticipate one's time. Like a fish taken in a cruel net, or like birds caught in a snare, so mortals are snared at a time of calamity, when suddenly it falls upon them. So ends the reading. So, this young man was not me. Well, not necessarily. He was the author of Ecclesiastes, as the Christians call it, or Kohelet, as he might have said in Hebrew. Either way, it means something like the preacher. Kohelet grew up believing that God ran the world on a merit system. If you live well, you'll be rewarded. If you become wise, people will start paying attention. You may have been taught something similar. Perhaps you learned that if you followed your parents' religion, you would go to heaven and be happy. Or, if your home was secular like mine, you might have learned that freedom from religion would empower you to make this life a happy life. We grew up in various religions, but we also share a common national or cultural religion. Every day, our culture teaches us to be consumers. Every day, we're taught by our economy to buy things, services, experiences that we expect will make us happy. It's actually listed in the Declaration of our National Independence. Our inalienable rights include life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so for us, Kohelet has some good and some confusing news. The good news is that it's fine to pursue happiness. The confusing news is that the best way to pursue happiness is not to pursue happiness. Happiness is a byproduct of a good life, not its goal. In his experience, there's no guarantee that good deeds will be rewarded. That was true in his world, and it's true in ours. There's no guarantee, but there is such a thing as good advice, which Kohelet does his best to offer based on his experience. Who was Kohelet? Well, traditionally, he was supposed to be King Solomon, but that's not true. Kohelet lived much later, during the so-called Axial Age, a time when people all over the world were asking new questions about the meaning of our lives as individuals. It was around 500 to 300 BCE, plus or minus, the age of Socrates, the Buddha, the Hebrew prophets, Lao Tzu, and others, who laid the ground for what we now call the great religions of the world. Before the axial age, religion mostly had to do with nations. Yahweh, God of Israel, the Greek pantheon presiding over the Homeric wars, Hindu gods enacting epics of the great India, Mahabharata. During the axial age, the focus shifted. People reflected on their inner lives and wondered about their own moral choices. Socrates said that an unexamined life is not worth living. Arjuna, the archer in the Bhagavad Gita, agonizes over whether to fulfill his duty as a warrior when it conflicted with his sense of right and wrong. The Buddha transformed ancient practices of yoga into a comprehensive guide for living and a roadmap for an individual escape from suffering. There's debate about when exactly the actual axial age happened, began, and ended, whether the whole idea even is useful or not. But it does give some sense of context for the time Kohelet lived and the answers he was looking for. So the axial age is one context. Another is the category of wisdom. Wisdom is the kind of teacher, the kind of writer that Kohelet was. Part of a global movement, again, of people who were testing their ideas by experience, and particularly by individual experience. The book of Ecclesiastes stands out in the Bible because it takes a skeptical approach. The preacher is determined to take life as he finds it, and not to buy into any comforting illusions that don't stand up to experience. Ecclesiastes also stands out in the Bible because it's one of the few books that form for you a clear picture of the author. There are some others. Paul's writings, Paul's letters, especially the ones he actually wrote. Other wisdom books like Job and Proverbs and the Song of Songs. You don't know who the author was, we don't know, but you can feel the presence of a writer, someone struggling with life. But more than any other biblical author, I think, Kohelet puts himself right out there where you can get to know him. I like him. In another life, I think the preacher might have been a Unitarian Universalist. He scrutinizes life. He has the courage to live with uncertainty. He knows that there are some things we just don't know. And he's not a prude. The preacher has tried lots of ways of being happy, and I think he might have been a lot of fun. So, what does the preacher say? His first famous words are, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." The word translated vanity is ebel, breath or wind or fog, emptiness, pointlessness, cloudiness. Genesis uses the same word ebel for Cain's brother, Abel, the first human being to die. Abel, vanity. Kohelet begins, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. Kohelet exposes human life in its true smallness. The sun and the earth go on regardless. That may not be news to you, but it was news to him. He goes on, all things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Some of us know what Kohelet is describing. We call it depression, where the world is colorless and flattened. And we too universalize our feelings. If I'm depressed, the universe must be depressing. If I am bored, there must be nothing new under the sun. By the way, under the sun is one of Kohelet's favorite expressions. He uses it to stake out the human point of view. Kohelet does not deny that life might have some big meaning from God's point of view, but he's describing life as he experiences it, under the sun. If you are depressed, if your world is flat and colorless, you should ask for help. Depression can be treated. Talk therapies, behavioral techniques, and drugs can all help put you back on the path to happiness. When you're clinically depressed, it does make sense to pursue happiness in those ways. For everything there is a season, says the preacher, and a time for every matter under heaven. You knew it was coming, right? It's one of Kohelet's greatest hits. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. Pete Seeger's song, which we'll sing later, reflects the sadness of this passage and the ways that it hints at a pathway back to happiness. Kohelet says, I know that there is nothing good for a man except to be happy and to live the best life he can while he is alive. This very Unitarian Universalist conclusion comes out of Kohelet's discovery that living well guarantees nothing, but it does bring us into harmony with the ebb and flow of life under the sun. The best way to pursue happiness is not to pursue happiness at all, but to accept life and to live it day by day. I have to give a trigger warning here. As he talks about this, Kohelet mentions God. I know, he says, that whatever God does lasts forever. To add to it or subtract from it is impossible. And he has done it all in such a way that we feel awe in his presence. Now, whether you believe in God or not, you may recognize what he's talking about. There's a lot about life that doesn't make much sense to us. But it is what it is. To add to it or subtract from it is impossible. Facts are sometimes facts. Some things we can change, but mostly our job is to adjust. Okay, even more bad news. People are the same as animals. Is that bad news or good? I don't know. He actually says this. The fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knows whether the human spirit goes upward or the spirit of animals goes downward to the earth? Amazing. Ahead of his time. Kohelet is not talking science, really. He's talking about human pride, our belief that we can climb a special ladder up to heaven and find happiness that way. Says Kohelet, no, not really. Like animals, like other animals, we have lives to live, and our first job is to live them. Happiness comes as a byproduct. He says, so I saw that there is nothing better than that all should enjoy their work, for that is their lot. Events that happen under the sun are largely random, so far as we can tell, but they have a majesty that apparently gives apparently mundane activities a sense of larger meaning. So what does Kohelet teach us about that? Moderation. Don't be over-righteous, says Kohelet. Don't be over-wise. Don't be over-wicked. And don't be a fool. Don't pay too much attention to what other people say. Cut yourself a break. Surely, says Kohelet, there is no one on earth so righteous as to do without ever sinning. Kohelet teaches moderation even in pursuit of wisdom. There is only so wise anyone can be, including him. So we should take his counsel with a grain of salt. And then, as if to prove his point, in the same chapter that provided Pete Seeger with a song lyric, Kohelet all but ghost writes another song, this time for Jimmy Buffett. Suddenly, Kohelet starts complaining about the woman who was a trap, whose heart is nets, whose hands are fetters. Well, you can guess what happened, right? Kohelet fell head over heels with a really pretty woman, and she dumped him, and it's all her fault. Some people claim that there's a woman to blame, but then he sees what's happening and admits that a better man would not have made the same mistake. One who pleases God escapes her, he says, but the sinner is taken. But I know my own damn fault. Right. Who says we don't have common scripture in our culture? I like this book a lot. Kohelet often says one thing and then says almost the opposite. One scholarly theory is that the book was written to be performed by multiple voices, highlighting the contradictions that stem from life under the sun. It's different from the way that many of us were taught to think about the Bible as a single book with a coherent, even scolding message. The book of Ecclesiastes is something quite different, a protest against religion's wish to transcend human limitation with false promises, and philosophy's continual temptation to draw grand conclusions from small evidence. I returned, he writes, and here I'll switch to the familiar King James translation of 1611, and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all. Time and chance happeneth to them all. The book of Ecclesiastes contains, besides its big themes, a wealth of practical advice. The preacher holds forth on the value of a good name, advises that it's better to go to a house of mourning than the house of laughter, for to be mourned is the lot of everyone, and the living should take this to heart. He notes that the rebuke of the wise one is better than the praise of fools, that serenity is better than worry, calm better than resentment, and wisdom better than possessions. And he says, do not ask why the old days were better than these, for that is a foolish question. Kohelet insists that nothing, neither piety nor pleasure nor wealth nor even wisdom, can make of life under the sun anything more than Abel, air, wind, vanity. And yet, having accepted that hard truth, the preacher yet finds happiness in moderation, happiness in living. The pursuit of happiness is and should be an inalienable right. But the best way to pursue happiness is not to pursue happiness at all, but to pursue life. Devote yourself to your life's work in the widest sense of that word. Do something for another person. Try to make the world or some small part of the world a better place. Reach out to friends and family and strangers. Find a way to make your life livable. We can't be certain of long-term results, but we can know the difference between living well and living selfishly. When a time of suffering comes, keep yourself ready for a time of joy. For everything, there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven.